There's a version of this story where Ben Affleck never even saw that email. It sat in his inbox, unopened, buried under studio notes, legal threads, and whatever else fills the day of someone whose personal life is unraveling in real time. And honestly, that might be the best case scenario. Because the email didn't arrive in a vacuum. It landed on May 17th, 2024. That date isn't random. By then, headlines had already been circling for weeks about tension between Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez. They hadn't been photographed together in 47 days. The last public sighting of them as a couple was March 30th in New York City. After that, speculation took over. Reports suggested they were living separately in Los Angeles. At the same time, Affleck was working on The Accountant too, juggling production responsibilities while navigating what appeared to be serious strain at home. And as if that wasn't enough, there was mounting criticism around Jennifer Lopez's documentary projects, This Is Me Now and The Greatest Love Story Never Told. Affleck had reportedly played a major role in shaping at least one of those projects. When public reactions skewed negative, he wasn't detached from it. His name was attached to the creative direction. So picture the backdrop: marriage rumors escalating, industry chatter buzzing, criticism building, and cameras tracking every movement. That's the moment an email appears from Blake Lively. It opens casually. "Hey, it's Blake, don't hang up." Then comes the pleasantry. "I hope life is treating you beautifully." But by mid-May, life didn't appear particularly beautiful for him. Publicly, it looked turbulent. The body of the message shifts quickly into why she's reaching out. She describes going through the most upsetting experience I've ever had on a movie. She explains she rewrote and restructured the entire script. She emphasizes there's zero pressure, but the request itself is significant. She wants him to watch the film, roughly 2 hours, and offer feedback. She even lowers the bar by suggesting a simple voice memo would do. On paper, that might sound like a professional favor between peers, but timing changes perception, because at that exact point, Affleck was reportedly living apart from his wife, facing public scrutiny over both his marriage and the documentaries tied to it, and immersed in filming commitments. Then there's the detail that complicates everything further. She mentions his wife and kids, saying she'd love their opinion too. She adds that the film involves domestic violence, just so no one is caught off guard. She says she's a fan of Jennifer and would be honored to have her perspective. In isolation, those lines read polite, inclusive, even respectful. But against the reality of a marriage reportedly on the brink and headlines suggesting they weren't even sharing a home, it feels tone-deaf at best. By May 17th, the lack of public appearances and ongoing rumors had become impossible to ignore. What stands out most isn't the ask itself, it's the disconnect. She references that Ryan had been talking about him recently, which implies awareness, which makes the omission of his visible personal crisis even more striking. If you're discussing someone enough to bring them up casually in an email, it's hard to believe you haven't also seen the headlines attached to their name. And then the closing line, playful, almost teasing. If you're still reading this, maybe you're not as busy as you think. It's meant to be lighthearted, but when someone's life appears to be splitting in two publicly, joking about their availability lands differently. This isn't about assuming malicious intent, it's about perspective. On May 17, 2024, Ben Affleck was facing documented professional backlash, visible marital strain, and active production demands. Into that environment came a 2-hour viewing request framed as no pressure. Maybe he read it, maybe he didn't. Maybe he intended to reply and never found the space. But when you align the date, the headlines, the separation rumors, and the professional criticism, the email stops feeling casual. It starts feeling misplaced. What makes this even more layered isn't just the timing, it's the emotional framing inside the email itself. Blake describes her film experience as the most upsetting experience I've ever had on a movie. That's not mild frustration, that's extreme language. She explains she rewrote and restructured the script, essentially positioning herself as the one who stepped in to fix chaos.
The message paints a picture of creative conflict, of stepping up when others didn't, and in that narrative, she casts herself as someone who nearly carried the entire project on her back. She even says the movie nearly killed her. Now, pause there, because at the same moment she's describing her professional ordeal in those terms, Ben Affleck is reportedly living apart from his wife, facing headlines about tension in his marriage, and absorbing criticism tied to the documentary projects connected to his relationship. One crisis is creative, the other is deeply personal and public. And yet, the email doesn't acknowledge that reality at all. Instead, the tone remains centered on her need for reassurance. She emphasizes how much she's invested, how badly she wants it to work, how important his feedback would be. The phrase zero pressure appears again, but psychologically, repeating that phrase often signals the opposite. When you have to state there's no pressure, it usually means you understand there is. Then she widens the circle. She suggests that if his wife or kids are around, she'd love their opinion too. She mentions the subject matter involves domestic violence. She says she's a fan of Jennifer and would be honored to have her perspective. Here's where it becomes even more complicated. By mid-May, the lack of joint appearances between Ben and Jennifer had already fueled intense speculation. Reports suggested they weren't even staying in the same residence. Publicly, it looked like a relationship under strain, so asking for Jennifer's involvement during a rumored separation feels disconnected from the visible reality. And then there's another detail. She mentions that Ryan had been talking about him recently. That line suggests familiarity, recent discussion, ongoing awareness, which makes the absence of any acknowledgement of what he was going through even more striking. It creates a contrast between two worlds. In one world, Blake is battling on-set chaos, rewriting scripts, fighting for creative control, and seeking validation from a respected filmmaker. In the other world, Ben is navigating marriage rumors, media narratives, professional backlash, and active production commitments. The email bridges those worlds, but only in one direction. It asks him to step into hers. It doesn't step into his. And that imbalance is what makes the entire exchange feel off. Not because asking for feedback is wrong, not because professional peers can't support one another, but because context matters. When someone is publicly weathering personal upheaval, the bar for awareness rises. Even a small favor can feel heavy when everything else is already collapsing. Then there's the closing tone, slightly playful, almost teasing. If he's still reading, maybe he's not as busy as he thinks. It's meant to be charming, but in a moment where his life appeared anything but calm, charm risks sounding dismissive. What this ultimately reveals isn't just a poorly timed email, it highlights how insulated Hollywood relationships can be. People can be in the same industry, in overlapping circles, referenced in casual conversation, and still operate in completely different realities. From Blake's perspective, she was reaching out to someone experienced, someone she respected, someone who could give valuable creative insight. From the outside, though, it reads like a request made without fully accounting for the storm he was in. And that's where the bigger question begins. Was this simply bad timing, or was it something deeper?
What really lingers isn't just the content of the email, it's the awareness gap it exposes. By May 17, 2024, Ben Affleck wasn't operating in a quiet season of life. He was in the middle of filming The Accountant 2. Headlines were documenting that he and Jennifer Lopez had not appeared together publicly for 47 days. Reports suggested they were living separately, and conversations around the reception of the documentary projects tied to their relationship were circulating widely. That's the backdrop. Against that reality, Blake's message reads like someone moving through her own crisis bubble. She emphasizes how much she invested, how she rewrote and restructured the script, how upsetting the experience had been for her. She frames her request carefully, zero pressure, but still asks for time, attention, and thoughtful critique. And here's the thing about time in moments like that. It's not just hours on a clock, it's emotional capacity.
When someone is navigating a potential separation, industry scrutiny, and active production commitments simultaneously, even small requests can feel amplified. Watching a 2-hour film about domestic violence and offering detailed feedback isn't light viewing. It requires focus, energy, engagement. Then there's the layer involving Jennifer. Blake says she's a fan and would be honored to have her take. On paper, that's flattering, but if the reports of separation and tension were accurate, the idea of looping Jennifer into a private film critique at that moment feels unrealistic. It assumes stability where the public narrative suggested instability. It also reveals something subtle, a belief that access equals availability. Just because someone is accomplished, just because they've directed, produced, or shaped projects before, just because they exist within your extended circle, none of that guarantees emotional bandwidth, especially not during public upheaval. Another striking detail is how the email positions validation as urgent. The movie nearly killed her. She needs this to work. She needs insight. She needs reassurance. It's deeply personal language about a professional project. Meanwhile, Affleck's personal life was reportedly becoming a professional headline. Two different crises, two different scales, one email bridging them without fully acknowledging the difference. That's why many people believe he may not have responded at all. There's no widely surfaced reply, no documented exchange that matches the detail of the message itself. And sometimes silence isn't indifference, it's prioritization. If he didn't open it, that might have been accidental. If he opened it and chose not to respond, that might have been intentional. Either way, the absence of a visible reply speaks volumes. Because when your own life is under scrutiny, when your marriage is being dissected publicly, when your creative work is facing criticism, when you're deep in production on a major film, the last thing you may want is to step into someone else's professional turmoil. The bigger takeaway isn't about villainizing anyone involved. It's about perspective. In Hollywood, relationships blur. Professional favors mix with personal friendships. Creative collaboration overlaps with social proximity. But timing still matters. Awareness still matters. Context always matters. On May 17, 2024, one person was fighting for a film she believed in, the other appeared to be fighting to stabilize his personal and professional world at the same time. And when those two realities collided in a single inbox, the disconnect became impossible to ignore.